I never thought I'd be that guy staring at an envelope with shaking hands. But there I was. James Mercer, 37 years old, standing in the hallway of Patterson and Wilkins law firm in downtown Boston, clutching what could either be my salvation or my damnation. My father, Richard Mercer, had been a pillar of the community, successful real estate developer, philanthropist, and a notoriously private man. 6 days ago, he'd suffered a massive heart attack while reviewing blueprints for his latest project. The man who seemed invincible was gone, leaving behind a complicated legacy and an even more complicated family. "Mr. Mercer, they're ready for you." The receptionist's voice snapped me back to reality. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket and followed her down the hallway. The conference room was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end Boston law firm. Dark mahogany table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. My younger sister Elaine was already seated, her eyes red-rimmed but composed. My stepmother Victoria sat opposite, looking more inconvenienced than grieved. My older brother Thomas hadn't arrived yet. Typical. "James?" Victoria's acknowledgement was cold, barely a greeting. I nodded. "Victoria." Our relationship had been strained since she married my father 15 years ago, when I was in college. She was only 12 years my senior, and neither of us had ever figured out how to navigate that uncomfortable dynamic. Mr. Patterson, Dad's attorney for over 30 years, entered carrying a leather portfolio. "Good morning, everyone. We'll begin shortly. We're just waiting for—" "Sorry I'm late." Thomas burst through the door, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and last night's whiskey. At 42, he looked every bit the successful hedge fund manager. Tailored suit, perfect haircut, and the confidence of someone who believed he deserved everything he got. Traffic was a nightmare. "Let's get this over with." Patterson cleared his throat. "Now that we're all here, we can proceed with the reading of Richard Mercer's last will and testament." I shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of the envelope in my pocket. 3 days earlier, our family housekeeper, Mrs. Cabrera, had pulled me aside during the funeral reception. "Your father left this for you," she'd whispered, pressing the envelope into my hands. "He made me promise to give it to you after he was gone. He said you should open it before the will reading." Inside was a letter written in my father's unmistakable handwriting and a copy of what appeared to be a page from his will, with my name visibly erased and replaced with Thomas's. The letter was brief, but devastating. "James, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. The will they'll read isn't the true one. Victoria convinced me to change it last year when I was at my weakest. The real will is in the safe at the lake house. Combination 18 to 4207. Don't let them know until you have it. Trust no one. I'm sorry. Dad." Patterson's voice brought me back to the present. "The will is dated September 17th of last year. Mr. Mercer was of sound mind and body when he signed it." I glanced at Victoria, who seemed remarkably composed. Too composed. Patterson began reading the standard legal preamble before getting to the meat of it. "To my beloved wife Victoria, I leave our primary residence in Beacon Hill, my personal effects therein, and the sum of $5 million. Victoria's face remained impassive. "To my daughter Elaine, I leave my art collection, which she has always admired, and the sum of $10 million. Elaine dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "To my son, Thomas, I leave my controlling interest in Mercer Development Corporation, my vacation properties in Martha's Vineyard and Aspen, and the sum of $15 million. Thomas couldn't suppress a satisfied smile. "And to my son, James." Patterson paused, adjusting his glasses. I held my breath. "I leave my collection of books and the sum of $100,000. The room fell silent. Even Thomas looked uncomfortable with the disparity. $100,000 wasn't nothing, but compared to what everyone else received, it might as well have been pocket change. And books? My father knew I barely read anything besides architectural journals. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Patterson nodded, seeming slightly embarrassed. "That concludes the distribution of assets." I reached into my pocket and felt the envelope. The moment had come. But just as I was about to pull it out, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't. Not yet. Meet me at Riverside Park. 1 hour. Come alone." I hesitated, then let my hand fall away from the envelope. "If there are no questions, that concludes our business today," Patterson said. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I need to review the original document." Patterson looked startled. "That's highly unusual, but I suppose—" "It's fine," Victoria cut in sharply. "Let him see it. It won't change anything." Patterson slid the document across the table. I examined the page that matched the copy in my pocket. The erasure was subtle but visible if you knew what to look for. A slight difference in the texture of the paper. The ink a marginally different shade. "Everything in order?" Thomas asked, impatience evident in his voice. I handed the will back to Patterson. "For now." As everyone gathered their belongings, I slipped out without another word. I had an hour to get to Riverside Park and figure out who had just saved me from making what might have been a catastrophic mistake. The September air was crisp as I walked along the Charles River. Boston was showing its first hints of fall, trees beginning their transformation into the fiery colors New England was famous for. Dad had loved this time of year. I found a bench in the quieter section of the park and waited. Precisely 1 hour after the text, a familiar figure approached, Mrs. Cabrera. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said, sitting beside me. "Why did you stop me from showing the letter?" She glanced around nervously. "Because Patterson is in Victoria's pocket. Has been for years. If you had revealed the letter, he would have made sure the real will disappeared before you could get to it." "How do you know all this?" "I've worked for your father for 25 years, James. I see everything, hear everything. Victoria and Patterson have been planning this for over a year. When your father had that health scare last summer, she convinced him to change his will. But he regretted it and secretly created a new one. Why would Dad trust Patterson with the original will, but create a secret one? Because your father was a cautious man who knew how to hedge his bets. Patterson only saw what your father wanted him to see." I pulled out the envelope. "What about this?" "Insurance. Your father knew something might happen to him before he could fix things officially." "And the lake house?" "It's technically Thomas's now." Mrs. Cabrera smiled. "Not yet. The property transfers haven't been processed. You have 48 hours before everything becomes official." I stood up, suddenly energized. "I need to get to the lake house." "Be careful, James. There's more at stake than money. Much more." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Your father discovered something last year. Something about Victoria's past. That's when everything changed." "What did he find out?" "I don't know details. But whatever it was, it terrified him enough to create a contingency plan." She handed me a key. "Back door of the lake house. The alarm code is your birthday." I took the key, feeling its weight. The weight of responsibility. Of truth. "One more thing," she said. "Don't go alone." The drive to Lake Winnipesaukee took just under 2 hours. I could have made it in less, but I needed time to think, to plan. The lake house had been our family's retreat since before I was born. A sprawling cedar and glass structure nestled among pines, with a private dock extending into the crystal-clear waters. I'd called Elaine before leaving Boston. Despite our differences over the years, she was the only one I trusted with this. "This is crazy, James," she'd said. "Breaking into the lake house? Searching for a secret will? I'm not breaking in. I have a key. And it's not just about the money, Elaine. Something isn't right." There was a long pause before she responded. "I'll meet you there at 7. As I turned onto the private road leading to the house, memories flooded back. Summer days swimming off the dock, winter nights by the massive stone fireplace, Dad teaching me to fish when I was 7. This place held the best parts of our family history, before Mom died, before Victoria entered our lives. I parked in the trees, out of sight from the main entrance, and circled around to the back of the house. The key worked smoothly in the lock, and I punched in my birthday on the alarm keypad, 041887. The house was eerily quiet, preserved in time like a museum to our former lives. I moved silently through the kitchen, past the living room with its wall of windows facing the lake, and into Dad's study. The safe was behind a painting of the Boston skyline, a mediocre watercolor I'd given him for Father's Day when I was 16. He'd insisted on framing it. I swung the painting aside and stared at the safe. 1842 and 07. The combination worked on the first try, and the heavy door swung open. Inside was a single manila envelope, with "The Truth" written across it in Dad's bold handwriting. I reached for it just as headlights swept across the windows. A car was coming up the driveway. I quickly closed the safe, replaced the painting, and ducked into the adjacent bathroom. Through the narrow window, I could see a black Audi, Thomas's car. "Damn it," I muttered. How did he know I was here? The front door opened. I heard voices. Thomas wasn't alone. "Check upstairs," Thomas said. "I'll look down here." I clutched the envelope to my chest, heart pounding. The study door creaked open, and I held my breath as Thomas's footsteps moved around the room. He paused near the painting, and I was certain he'd discovered the safe. But then his phone rang. "Yeah, I'm here now," he said. "No sign of him yet." A pause. "Of course I'll call when I find him. Victoria's losing her mind over this." Another pause. "Look, I don't care what Dad wrote in some letter. The will is final." So they knew about the letter. Mrs. Cabrera must have been wrong about keeping it secret. Or someone else had told them. Thomas left the study, and I heard his footsteps recede toward the kitchen. I needed to get out. But with at least 2 people searching the house, my options were limited. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. A text from Elaine. "Outside. Back door. Hurry." I cracked the bathroom door open. The hallway was clear. Moving as quietly as possible, I made my way back through the kitchen, freezing when I heard voices from the dining room. "He has to be here somewhere," Thomas was saying. "His car's outside." I slipped out the back door and into the darkness. Elaine was waiting by the tree line, her face pale in the moonlight. "Run," she whispered. We sprinted through the woods to where she'd parked her car on an old service road. Once inside, she threw the car into reverse and backed out quickly. Headlights off until we reached the main road. "How did they know I was here?" I asked, still catching my breath. "They put a tracker on your car," Elaine said grimly. "Victoria's been having you followed since the funeral." "How do you know that?" She kept her eyes on the road. "Because she asked me to help them. She said you were unstable, that you might do something drastic after being slighted in the will. And you agreed?" I pretended to agree. I needed to know what they were planning. She glanced at me. "Did you find it? The real will?" I held up the envelope. "I think so. We can't go back to the city," she said. "Not tonight. They'll be waiting." "I know a place," I said. "Dad's old fishing cabin, about 20 miles north of here. No one's been there in years." The cabin was exactly as I remembered it. Small, rustic, and hidden deep in the woods. Dad had bought it from an old friend decades ago, and as far as I knew, it wasn't listed in any of his assets. The perfect hideout. We sat at the rough wooden table, a kerosene lamp between us, and opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive, a handwritten letter, and a legal document, a will dated just 3 months ago. "Dear James and Elaine," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct, and I didn't live long enough to make things right. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to believe, but I have documented everything on the enclosed drive. Last year I discovered that Victoria is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Valerie Simmons, and 15 years ago, she was the prime suspect in the death of her former husband, a wealthy real estate investor in Seattle. She was never charged due to lack of evidence, but the case remains open. I confronted her with what I knew, and she convinced me it was all a misunderstanding, that she had been framed by her husband's jealous business partner. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right. I hired a private investigator who uncovered even more disturbing information. Victoria has used at least 3 different identities over the past 20 years, and 2 of her previous husbands died under suspicious circumstances. By the time I learned the full truth, she had already manipulated me into changing my will, giving her and Thomas control of everything I've built. Yes, Thomas knows everything. He and Victoria have been working together from the beginning. The will enclosed here is the true expression of my wishes. I've left copies with my old friend Judge Michael Harrigan, and with my banker in Switzerland. If anything happens to me, contact them immediately. I'm sorry for bringing this darkness into our family. I was foolish and blind. But it's not too late to make it right. Be careful. Trust no one but each other. I love you both. Dad." Elaine and I sat in stunned silence. Finally, she spoke. "We need to call the police." "With what evidence? A letter and a USB drive?" "Victoria will claim Dad was paranoid, that he wasn't thinking clearly. Then we read the will. See what's in it." The real will was drastically different from the one Patterson had read. Elaine and I each received 40% of Mercer Development Corporation, with the remaining 20% divided among long-term employees. Victoria received only the legally mandated spousal portion, and Thomas was left his current shares in the company, but no additional stake. "Thomas must have been furious when he found out," Elaine said. "Furious enough to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "You don't think—" "I don't know what to think anymore." I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained folders of evidence, photographs, financial records, private investigator reports, even recordings of conversations between Victoria and Thomas, dating back over a year. "Listen to this," I said, clicking on an audio file labeled V&T Lake House, July 24th. Victoria's voice filled the cabin. Once we have control of the company, we sell everything. The developments, the land, all of it. We could walk away with over 200 million. What about James and Elaine? Thomas asked. What about them? James is too idealistic to fight back, and Elaine will follow her brother's lead. She always does. And Dad? A cold laugh. Your father's health isn't as robust as everyone thinks. Heart problems run in his family. It would be a tragedy, but not unexpected. I stopped the recording, feeling sick. They planned it all. We need to get this to the police, Elaine insisted. Now. First, we need to secure the real will, I said. We take this to Judge Harrigan tomorrow morning, get it validated, then go to the police with everything. Elaine nodded, then froze as headlights swept across the cabin windows. How did they find us? I whispered. The tracker is on your phone too, a voice said from the doorway. Thomas stood there, gun in hand. You really should be more careful with your technology, little brother. Thomas looked different than he had in the conference room. Wilder, desperate, the carefully maintained facade crumbling at the edges. Give me the drive and the will, he said, gesturing with the gun. It's over, Thomas, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We know everything. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't know anything. You never have. The good son, the one who stayed loyal to Dad's vision while I did all the dirty work, made all the hard decisions to keep the company profitable. By cutting corners, bribing officials. Those hard decisions nearly bankrupted us 3 years ago. And who bailed us out? Not Dad with his outdated ethics. It was Victoria's connections that saved us. You mean Valerie's connections, Elaine said quietly. Or whatever her real name is. Thomas's expression flickered. So, you know about that. We know she's killed before, I said. And we know you helped her plan Dad's death. He shook his head. That wasn't the plan. She was just supposed to convince him to change the will. The heart attack was… He hesitated. Convenient. Did she poison him? Elaine asked, her voice breaking. Thomas didn't answer, which was answer enough. Why, Thomas? I asked. Why side with her against your own family? Because Dad never respected what I brought to the table. He was going to phase me out, give control to you, the architect with the grand visions who doesn't understand the first thing about running a business. So you decided to take everything. I deserved everything, he shouted, the gun shaking in his hand. And now what? I asked. You kill us too? Make it look like an accident? For a terrible moment, I thought he might actually do it. Then his shoulders sagged. I never wanted it to go this far. It's not too late to fix this, Elaine said gently. Help us bring Victoria to justice. You don't understand. She's not alone in this. There are people behind her, people who invested millions based on her promises of what would happen after Dad was gone. What people? A car door slammed outside. You should have stayed out of it, James, Thomas said, his voice suddenly tired. You should have taken your books and your 100 grand and disappeared. The cabin door burst open, and Victoria stepped in, followed by a man I didn't recognize. Tall, Eastern European, with cold eyes and a bulge under his jacket that suggested another gun. Family reunion, Victoria said, her perfect smile now predatory. How touching. It's over, Victoria, I said. We have everything. The evidence, the recordings, the real will. Valerie, she corrected. Might as well use my real name among family. She glanced at the USB drive on the table. And yes, I see you have Richard's little insurance policy. Quite thorough, your father. I underestimated him. Did you kill him? Elaine asked directly. Valerie shrugged. Digitalis, untraceable after a few hours, simulates a heart attack perfectly. He didn't suffer, if that's what you're worried about. The casual way she admitted to murder left me speechless. Now, she continued, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the drive and the will. My associate here will ensure you're both comfortable until the property transfers are complete. After that, she smiled. Well, accidents happen, especially in remote cabins. There are copies, I bluffed, with people you can't reach. Judge Harrigan and the Swiss banker. Please. Michael had a stroke 2 months ago. He's in no condition to verify anything. And as for Switzerland, she shook her head. Your father never made it to Zurich. His heart attack came at such an inconvenient time. I looked at Thomas, who wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd known all along. Enough talking, the Eastern European man said. Get the drive. As he moved toward the table, headlights swept across the windows again, followed by the unmistakable sound of police sirens. Valerie's composure cracked. What did you do? The answer came in the form of Mrs. Cabrera, stepping through the door with 2 state troopers behind her. They didn't do anything, she said. I did. Maria, Valerie hissed. You should have stayed out of this. Mrs. Cabrera, Maria, stood tall, unintimidated. I promised Mr. Mercer I would protect his children if anything happened to him. I keep my promises. The Eastern European man reached for his gun, but the troopers were faster, their weapons already drawn. Police! Hands where we can see them! What followed was a blur of activity. Thomas surrendering immediately, Valerie attempting to flee out the back before being tackled by a trooper, the Eastern European man being disarmed and handcuffed. Outside, more police cars arrived, along with an ambulance and, surprisingly, Mr. Patterson, looking pale and shaken. I had no idea, he kept saying. I suspected something wasn't right with the will, but I never imagined. Maria explained everything as we sat in the back of a police cruiser, wrapped in shock blankets despite the mild night. Your father knew he was in danger months ago, she said. He came to me because I was the only one in the household not under Victoria's, Valerie's, influence. We set up a system. If anything happened to him, I was to wait until after the will reading, then contact Judge Harrigan's son, who's a detective with the state police. But Valerie said Judge Harrigan had a stroke, Elaine said. Another lie. He's perfectly fine. He's the one who organized this operation tonight. Your father told him everything months ago. And the tracker on my phone? I asked. Once I saw Thomas and Valerie following you, I contacted Detective Harrigan. They've been monitoring your location, waiting for everyone to be together before moving in. Dawn was breaking over the lake as we finished giving our statements. Valerie, Thomas, and their associate were taken away in separate police cars, facing charges ranging from fraud to first-degree murder. Patterson approached us, still looking shell-shocked. I've reviewed the will your father left in the safe. It's legitimate, properly witnessed, and notarized. I'll file it with the court this morning. Thank you, I said, too exhausted for anything else. For what it's worth, he added. I'm sorry. I should have seen what was happening. As he walked away, Elaine turned to me. What now? I looked out at the lake, where the rising sun was turning the water to gold. We rebuild. We honor Dad's legacy. We do what he always taught us to do, the right thing, even when it's difficult. Maria joined us, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. Your father would be proud of you both. In the distance, I could see the lake house, our lake house now, its windows catching the morning light. There would be challenges ahead. Legal battles, company transitions, the media circus that would inevitably follow a scandal involving one of Boston's prominent families. But standing there with Elaine and Maria, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel after the nightmare of the past few days. Hope. Dad had trusted us to carry on his legacy, to right the wrongs he couldn't. And that's exactly what we would do. The true inheritance wasn't the money or the company or the properties. It was the truth. Hard-won, painful, but ultimately liberating. And unlike the false will that had nearly destroyed us, this was an inheritance no one could ever take away.